Good morning, everybody. I think we can get started. You all are in for a treat today. My name is Keontae Bush. I'm one of the organizers with our Bowie State University team for our HBCU Plus Entrepreneurship Conference. You are in for an amazing session today. I'm seeing the HBCUs coming in the chat, so I love the energy in true form. You know, as HBCUs, we got to show our pride, our representation, and our energy. You have a phenomenal session of breaking into big tech today. And so without further ado, I will pass it over to our phenomenal moderator, Trevor Alexander, representing Morgan State University, by the way, to introduce himself, as well as our two other amazing, phenomenal panelists in tech as well. So I will pass it over to you, Trevor. Thank you, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Keontae. I'm super excited for this conversation. Very relevant, much needed, and just appreciate you all having us here to build out on the conversation around breaking into big tech. And so myself, again, Trevor Alexander, Morgan State University. I'm here on behalf of Hewlett Packard Inc., one of the founding companies of Silicon Valley. Have been around and for decades now, and we do a ton of work in the HBCU space. And today I have with me Sanja and also Chanda. I'm going to read both of their bios and then allow them to share a little bit about themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Chanda. She joined Microsoft in 2021 after spending over a decade in the management consulting industry, working at several big four firms and focusing on solving big challenges impacting people, utilizing her superpower to dissect complex challenges facing organizations. She's a leader of Racial Equity Initiative program at Microsoft's Airband Initiative and is committed to advancing broadband internet, real big problem in the HBCU ecosystem, right? That's being led out and is a fundamental right for Black and marginalized communities. Her projects aim to increase affordable internet access, promote participation in the internet, enable global economy, and foster adoption of AI tools. A true servant leader, Chanda is actively involved in various community organizations, including Jack and Jill of America, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Junior League of Washington, holds a BA in English from Howard University, Go Bisons, and lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband, Jason, and sons, Miles and Carter. How are you doing today, Chanda?
I'm good. Happy Friday, everyone.
Absolutely. Next, I'll read Sanja's bio, and then we're going to get right into a more informal, just informative conversation. Sanja is an accomplished executive operations specialist currently supporting the external affairs team at Meta. With a diverse career spanning roles in C-suite executive support, startup success, UX, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, Sanja brings a wealth of experience to her current position. Prior to joining Meta, she gained valuable insights into the tech industry while working at Google, where she held various roles and collaborated across teams such as public sector, Google for Good, and cloud sales on a global scale. Passionate about fostering the growth of future tech leaders, Sanja is committed to building and supporting the next generation of talent. Sanja is a proud Bison, having attended Howard University on a D1 lacrosse scholarship. Sanja currently resides in Prince George's County, Maryland, with her husband, Emil, and their dog, Apollo. Oh, the names, there are a lot of names. Sanja, Sean, did I miss anything? We read the long bios. I'll turn the floor over to you. Or first, Sanja, is there anything I missed in that bio? Anything you want to open up with?
Well, I want to say my name is pronounced Sonia. But no, you did not miss anything at all. So thank you.
Excellent, excellent. And Shunda, am I announcing your name correctly? Apologies, Sonia.
No, you're right. It's Shunda. And just so we're all clear, we're the other two panelists, we're Bison, okay? So I want to say that first and foremost, we're Bison. So keep that in the back of your head as we're answering questions, because you will see that there are some things that we tend to have in common, which makes us always pretty interesting panels to have on at the same time.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. So audience, I'll be asking both of our panelists here questions and driving the conversation. At times, I will also chime in as well about my journey into tech and different companies that I've worked with as well, and provide little nuggets. So my first question is, could each of you share your journey into big tech? What key steps or decisions help you land your role at Meta or Microsoft? Starting with you, Sonia.
Yeah. So my first step into tech was actually applying to Google. My path to tech is not common. I was working at a law firm for the head of the IRS at the time. He had left the IRS and had started his own law firm. And I knew I've always been like a futurist, and I was like, I know I want to work in tech. I know that I like want to be ahead of the technology that's coming out. And I applied online on Google's website, just saw an opportunity for a role as an executive assistant, and applied with a Hotmail email address. And I was shocked that they called me. And so that since that opportunity kind of, I don't want to say it fell in my lap, but it was an opportunity that I have not heard anyone else have that same opportunity. I treated my experience at Google like I was in grad school. I didn't attend grad school, and so I worked my way through the ranks by being available, taking on, going in as an executive assistant, starting our Black Googler network, founding our UX starters program, our Google for Startups program. I was just all hands on deck. And I was able to figure out what I really liked. And so by the time I got to Meta, I knew that I had lived in DC for quite a bit, that I wanted to work in the policy space. And that's kind of my plight into tech. And again, not super common to just apply through the website, but it was my experience.
I'm glad that worked out for you. That was, meant to be. That's super cool. And how about you, Shonda?
Sure. So I think my entry into tech is maybe a little bit more common. I knew somebody. And so I know that this whole coalition of people talk a lot about networking. So fortunately, I knew someone. I had worked in consulting for years. And in general, if you ever work in management consulting, you leave that industry just having just a really solid set of transferable skills. I've been doing program management for years. And then I also, again, been very involved in the community in a lot of different ways. So what I didn't have professionally, I had a lot of skills in my personal side. And so when I made the connections and then, found out about a role doing something that as far as the background, really had very little background in. The Airband initiative is all about broadband. And I know Trevor read my bio, but in layman's terms, essentially what I do is help Black people get internet, right? That's what I do. I help Black people get internet. And I know some of y'all are like, what do you mean Black people don't have internet? Black people do not have internet in the ways that they need to be able to be a futurist, okay? So that's all that I focus on. But because I have a lot of community development and a lot of just inroads in the community, that really helped me get my job. And, without that network, I can't say that an English major that had worked in consulting for a very long time would have been an attractive candidate.
Much appreciated, Shonda. I love the quick one-liner. Simplicity is always key, and it makes me think about my answer to this question as well. First, when I broke into tech, it was actually with Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Coming out of undergrad in 2000 and end of 15, HP and HPE had split off into two separate companies. I had more of a technical background and got hired by HPE through their job website, had applied, came in, and Shonda just reminds me of something, and that was one of the questions was explain the internet to me like I'm a kindergartner. And I had to do that as one of my, many interview questions, and ultimately worked there as a technology consultant. And now being at HP, it was actually because of someone who I knew, someone that studied at HR at Morgan State. We were having some food down in Houston, and so there's clearly multiple paths into tech. The big ones are applying or knowing someone on the inside, but it's also about doing the work so that people can leverage your name a bit easier when that time does come. So my next question is more around specific skills or experiences that are essential for entry level roles at Meta, at Microsoft, at HP, on big tech. Are there any unique skills or certifications that you recommend for HBCU students? And you can decide if you want to answer that more generally speaking or something more specific in your lane that you're very comfortable with. Starting with you, Sonia.
Yes. So I'm not technical. I will say that off top. It seems like both of you are. But I am not. So I mean, skills for me, like I think networking is the key. At Meta, like we pride ourselves on like being a community. That's our platform. And so networking has been truly key to finding opportunities to, having cross-functional meetings. You need to know where the source is, and there's a lot of digging and deciphering. So I think that is a huge piece, a big skill of being able to network and communicate. And then also, I think there's a level of working in tech. Like, as I mentioned, I'm not technical, but having, we do work with more technical folks. And so there is this level of like empathy that you should have when talking to folks that maybe, may not be understanding. There might be a misunderstanding of when you talk to someone who has a more technical background as opposed to someone who's a more operational background or an administrative background. So I think that is a key skill that I'd recommend. And then places that you can find to up level skills. Personally, I go on LinkedIn and I take the classes. I join a lot of meetup groups. Right now, our company is moving into a lot of large language models. We're releasing our large language models. And so taking AI courses on LinkedIn or Coursera, or even, like I said, going to meetup groups just to like hone in on those skills has been really helpful for me.
Much appreciated, Sonia. And I love the transparency. And I don't think we can ever hear enough that breaking into big tech, you don't have to be technical, right? We have to keep letting people know that, because big tech it makes millions of people to make these companies move around the clock. So thanks for sharing your specific background.
Yeah, and I would like to also add this. We do, like, to add to that, we do have like a lot of folks who, I mean, people don't think of security, like in building security, or I mean, we have, chefs on site who are, trained at some of the best culinary schools. And I mean, there's a lot of elements that go into, like you said, building the infrastructure of a tech company. So I think often folks are like, how can I code, or what should I learn? And there's so many roles that are available.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Super helpful there. Shonda, how about yourself? Any skills, certifications, anything that comes to mind for you?
Sure. And actually, I would say I think that having certifications is great. I think that what becomes really important, though, is that when you're looking at the big tech companies, everybody's smart at some point. Lots of people will have different certifications, but what gets you the job and what keeps you in the job is how you communicate with people. You need excellent analytical skills. You need to be intellectually curious, because in tech, something is always going to change. By the time you've mastered something, it's probably outdated. And that's okay. I think you also need to have a comfort level with failure. And what I mean by that is that when you're in tech, a lot of the ways that things get done is that you're experimenting. So if you are the type of person that has very much perfectionist tendencies and can't move on from a failure, it will be much more challenging for you to be successful. And I feel like that stuff starts to come out when you're talking in interviews about the things that you're involved in and things you want to do. And then Sonia said, I am not technical at all, y'all. The reason why I said I was an English major, because I am in a lot of ways very much a very typical English major. I love to read. I would say I'm a technologist. I'm probably a blurred, but the work that I do only requires me to understand, really not even understand, to explain and break down some of the technology that we use to try to get people the internet. A lot of the work that I primarily do is, again, program development and managing processes, talking to people. And interestingly enough, pretty much everybody that I work with has a law background. Most of them actually weren't practicing lawyers, but they either went to law school and then worked for the FCC. They went to law school and then went into government, so they understand policies really well. And so that's something else I would encourage people to think about, is that it's so much bigger than being technical. And I would also say right now, with the emerging of AI as a next generation, like driving the next generation of our entire economy and ecosystem, is that a lot of people can learn how to do the prompts, but what they need Black people and minorities to do specifically are to work on the large language model side. So that would be people who are maybe interested in psychology, right? Because we don't want AI to sound like AI. We want AI to sound like people. You don't want to put a search into ChatGPT and you say, show me images of Black joy, and they only show you somebody like sitting on the corner with like a lollipop in their hand. Like that's not what you want. So those are the type of skills that right now are in demand. And I really think that that opens up the background levels of people. It opens up the backgrounds a lot. A couple other things I want to add, because Sonia mentioned that we have cooks at these companies. They like some of the best food I've ever had has been at work. We also have people who are researchers. We need communication specialists. We need journalists, because all of this has to be communicated and be very specific for each tech company. The tech industry, the talking points, and the way that things are communicated, whether it's through the government, whether it's through news media, or whether it's through consumers, those are all very different skill sets. But again, those are like the things that journalists do. And so I want you all to keep that in mind, that when you think of a tech company, think about the entire ecosystem of a tech company and not just the end goal product.
A lot of gems in there. That certainly it makes a ton of sense, right? It's rapidly changing. That's really what stuck with me. Because coming from a technical background, Shonda, you make me think of your break into tech may not be exactly what you envision, right? It may not be an exact role what you study, may not be exactly what you majored in, especially as the landscape continues to get more competitive, as tools continue to change what's in demand from a skill set perspective. And I think about it coming from a technical background. I did network engineering for a while. I was very heavy on the Linux side. And now I've stepped away from it for a few years, right? I've been in more on project and program management. However, what I realize is that if I do decide to go back technical, the skill sets from just 5 or 6 years ago are different now. Now it's more, hey, we need you to know, be a software-defined networker, right? Network engineers need to know Python 5 or 6 years ago, but maybe we do now. And so there's beauty in that, because you can kind of pick up and get over a learning curve, just as quickly as someone who may have a strong foundation, because they have to keep learning as well. And so, at a more tactical level as well, one thing I would say, right, for all the students out there, we're going to talk a little bit more about resumes, putting your best foot forward there. But, as you're looking at these job descriptions, if there are certs, if there are skill sets, right, you should be able to reverse engineer a job description, a role, or get on the phone with somebody who actively works in that lane and get real specifics from them at those companies. So it's always case by case is what a lot of us are seeing in big tech. My next question pivots more around resumes and it's sort of on the networking side, right? So for students, recent graduates, even graduate students coming from HBCUs, what are some things that they can make themselves to stand out from like a branding standpoint? And this can either be like online branding, it can be even resume based if you are in the position of hiring anyone. Is there anything you're seeing that just makes graduates stand out, especially if they don't have prior experience at a large tech company? And then Sonia, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, so I mean, I recently was reviewing a few resumes, and I haven't tried this myself, but I have found that folks are starting to add like fun facts about themselves at the bottom of resumes, which is interesting. I think it's a good approach, just because when you do get, I mean, when you sync folks in for for me, when I see a cover letter that resonates with my path or my story, if I see a lacrosse player, I'm kind of like, lovely, like let's see how far, like let's try to help as much as possible. But as soon as you get into that interview, to like lighten the mood, if you put I'm an avid football fan, like we're going to talk about Jaden Daniels. Like we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about that at the beginning. So it gives you that moment of just like kind of letting yourself loose before you start a interview. And also it does set you apart. As Shonda said earlier, that this is, we work with a lot of smart people. It's super competitive. As I said, like my applying to Google via, just through the website is not common. And so you do want to find ways to separate yourself from the pack. And that can be, it can be difficult, because but it comes down to being authentic and being yourself. And if you can find ways to be yourself in your resume, I think it's super important. I hear a lot of like comments of folks saying, when applying to like tech companies, like, and I don't know if you've all heard this as well, but like folks have changed their name or like the spelling of their name, just because they don't want to stand out. And I think we, like specifically at Meta, like pride ourselves on like diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so being yourself really is what we're looking for as we're building out like our new tools. Like it's important to have different voices. So just any way that you can show your authentic self and in actually who you are is just it's what I recommend.
I love that. Yeah, it's your competitive advantage just to be authentic, to be one of one. That is the only thing that we have out here that someone else likely doesn't have. Skill sets, degrees are more commonplace.
Absolutely.
How about you, Shonda?
I would add, it's a little bit where Sonia was going, be an interesting person. Like do something more than go to class and go home. If you have a job, I understand that can be difficult, but as much as you can put on there that shows that you do more than just, the basics, that makes you an interesting person and will get you in the door. If you're going to go the route of doing fun facts, also try to make sure that there are things that other people know about and will be interested about that are outside of your age range. We've been talking about networking a little bit. I would encourage people to start making intergenerational relationships. That's one of the things that I feel like a lot of headlines have been about when we talk about communication skills and actually working with other people. The reality is the way that people in your generation communicate is vastly different than the way that Sonia, Trevor, and my generations communicate. And I wouldn't even say that we're all in the same generation, right? But that's something you need to be aware of, because at the end of the day, you're the one seeking an opportunity. And the best way to be able to do that is to make relationships. I also want to add that if you are going to go the route of applying like on a website, make sure everything is perfect, and anything you put on there, be prepared to speak to it. Please don't say that you are an avid soccer fan if you only like last play soccer in the little peewee leagues in kindergarten. It doesn't have to be soccer, but you have to find something that you can actually speak to. Because again, it's about being authentic. I know that it can be hard, or you can feel the pressure to want to mold yourself into a certain way that you think will appeal to the companies. But the reality is, you're not just looking to get in the door. When people start talking to you, if you are inauthentic, that comes across very easily. And then if you are fortunate enough to move into a role, if you are inauthentic, you can be very unhappy very quickly, which will have an impact on your performance and your future at a company. I think the last thing I would say is continue to do things like this and to follow up, is meeting people. Because sometimes what happens is that, yes, something may be, a position may be on LinkedIn, on the internet, and again, you can absolutely apply. But once people know you or they've seen you, sometimes there's name recognition from those applications. And then also they'll send out things personally to their networks. So if you're not on LinkedIn, that right now I would say is probably still the top resource for professional opportunities. Go on LinkedIn and really just start playing around a little bit. Look at some of the companies that you are interested in. And I would also highly recommend that you follow some of the industry leaders, whether it's the president of the company or just people working in management levels. Look at their careers and journeys, see what they're doing, see what they're interested in. If all of a sudden you see that everybody's talking about specific TV shows, go watch the show. It doesn't cost you anything. Like, go watch the show, because all the people who are interested in the things you say you're interested in are watching the show. It makes it so much easier to engage in conversations when you have something to talk about and something to add to it.
Can I also add one more thing too? Sorry.
Absolutely.
Adding to that, groups, like also on LinkedIn, like joining LinkedIn groups. So like not just following, or shameless plug, Facebook groups, join groups that feed into your interest, but also are in the industry. Oftentimes, like I'm in Facebook groups, and I'm on LinkedIn groups where, like Shonda mentioned, like there are jobs that go out that don't even go to the general population, that are already listed out, that I can send out to my peer group or other, folks who are looking for opportunities. So to definitely get involved with groups and build your network there too.
I love that. I love that. Super valuable information. I mean, I'm gonna pick up where Sonya left off on groups, and I want to, I mean, Shonda said as well, like so many things that cost you nothing but time. And yes, time is valuable. It's super valuable. It becomes more valuable the deeper you get into your career, maybe the older you get, the more responsibilities you have. But some of those things, just seeing what other people are interested in, that's a 10-minute search, right? Picking up the phone is 10 to 15 minutes of your time, but the ROI is infinite. I wrote down a couple of things. Picking up where Sonya left off is groups. I had a couple mentees and many mentors throughout my career in tech, which we'll talk about here on the next question around like what has mentorship been in your life. And one thing is I always advise my mentees, you should be going to as many in-person meetups that make sense as possible, right? Especially if your goal is a job, because I was in a coffee shop last week down here in Virginia, actually, and talking to a recent grad, and he was like, man, the level of success by putting your resume out there online is like, relatively low, but you got to do it. And then because your goal is to get at least a phone call with somebody, right? That's one step up. And then, you can put your voice and share your story. One step up from that is like a virtual call for you or in-person meeting. So if the highest like leverage is being able to get face to face with somebody in person because you can show your personality, then if you can cut straight to the chase by just going to a group meetup, you've in a sense skipped over those first three pillars. And 9 times out of 10, especially if you're breaking into tech, maybe your pockets aren't too good yet. Most of these meetups have good food, good amenities and good people and conversations, right? And on top of that, you're again cutting to the chase, from a relationship standpoint. So, once a month, whatever your cadence is, it works. Trust that. On the resume piece, one thing that we've noticed here at HP is number one, I work hand in hand with a gentleman named Donnell Taylor. He's the Morgan State grad who brought me into this role actually to help with this conference. And your resume does not have to be the best in the world, but it has to be suitable, right? It is your walking physical document. And as we've done resume workshops with organizations like ColorStack, we've seen some resumes just not be up to par coming out of our HBCUs. And so make sure that you're going to your friends across HBCUs, across PWIs, across MSIs. Hey, can I take a look at your resume? And just be honest and ask yourself, is it up to par? It may be better, it may be the same, it may be worse aesthetically, the information that's in there. And that's 9 times out of 10, no fault of your own. It may be a career center thing, maybe you just don't know. But my point in that, the action item is see at least 5 to 10 resumes of your friends and other colleagues across institutions so that you can see how you compare. And then the last thing that I'll say just around like that resume and branding piece is think about what your end goal is. My best friend at Old Dominion undergrad, I studied IT. He studied criminology. He is a highly paid cloud architect now, and he did it over the course of a few years. He is an introvert. I'm a lot more extroverted. He's not out trying to brand himself all the time, but he's very specific. If your end goal is, I need to be in a customer-facing role, I need to show that I'm good at public speaking, well, you need to demonstrate that on LinkedIn. You need to demonstrate that on your social media that you're the person for that job. If you're behind the scenes and that may not be what you want to ultimately be, then you got to take a little bit different approach and strategy. But it always should be driven by what your ultimate job role and end goal is. So just a couple pointers there that I've seen work, in real life. Okay, Sonya, my next question for you is, what role has mentorship played in your world within tech, getting into it and also staying in it? And how would you advise students to find or approach mentors?
Yeah, mentorship has been crucial. Like I said, I started out as an admin coming in. So, I mean, I had a lot of opportunity to work with like C-suite executives or VPs or presidents of our organization. And so I took those opportunities to not just to say, can we meet and can we discuss like my long-term goals, but like, what it was your path. How did you make it? What books are you reading so that I can like pull in and, learn how to, I learned to be a trusted advisor, which was, that was a key term a few years ago in tech. But I take every opportunity to communicate with everybody that I possibly can. As I mentioned, I'm not technical. Trevor, if I sat down with you, I would look to you to be a mentor as well and say, hey, like, I don't necessarily understand how this software impacts this, that, and the other. I would try to learn as much as I possibly can. And like, same thing. Like I look at everyone as possibly a mentor. Specifically though, with my mentors, I have just found folks that are willing to empower me, encourage me, to sometimes see my blind spots. I mentioned I'm a futurist. I take pride in being a wanderer, which is not necessarily, it's great in tech because everybody wants you to be an all-star generalist, but sometimes you really want to hone in on those pieces. And so someone who can look and say, like, you're actually really good at public speaking, maybe we should have you more forward facing, or and so I hope that I'm answering your question correctly. I have found with like my mentees that I found them in different spaces in their life when they were in college and were hoping to land a role in tech. Actually, one of my mentees wasn't even looking to go into tech. She just happened to be sidebarred when I went to support a friend at a conference, and she didn't know what she wanted to do. But through the conversation, I was like, I think you sound great for marketing. You should be doing marketing. And she followed up, and so we've been able to create like a strong relationship that has helped guide her actually get into Google. And so it's just a matter of being attentive, looking, not putting someone to the side if you hear someone's a software engineer and you want to get into tech, but you might want to be a marketer, it's not worth saying, oh, I'm not going to have a conversation with you. It's worth learning and understanding. And I think that's how you build those strong mentorship relationships. And yeah, it's been, that's my experience with mentorship and mentoring.
I love that. I've never heard the term, but it hit home. All-star generalist.
Yeah.
It makes a ton of sense.
Yep.
The whole generalist versus expert conversation
Yeah.
is it's always so interesting for another day. But I certainly love that you bring that term up.
Yep.
How about you, Shonda? Roles of mentors and mentees in your life?
Yeah, so I would say when it comes to mentors, I would encourage everyone to be open to mentors looking very different than what you think they should. Especially when you're at these big companies, whether it's tech or not, there's only so many people of color, y'all. There's only so many. And there's only that means that they only have so much time. And when you actually think about the way that these companies typically work, right? Typically it is a pyramid, right? And y'all know how pyramids go. And if you have a lot of people at the bottom, which is where you typically have the more diversity, always trying to reach to the people at the very top, they just can't. They just don't have the time. They don't have the bandwidth. And they're typically, if they're at the top, they're there for a reason. They're very, very busy people. So I would encourage people to don't just look for somebody who looks exactly like you as a potential mentor. Look at other people who approach work the same way that you approach work, or approach work the way that you would like to learn how to approach work. The other thing I would recommend is that sometimes your peer group can be some of your best mentors. And that's because they're pulling from their own networks, and they're pulling from mentors that you may not have access to. So you always want to make sure that you have solid peer networks, because as you grow higher and higher in your career, a lot of times those are the people who are going to be reaching out to you and saying, hey, we have these opportunities. I think you'd be a good fit for it because you've worked with them as a team. As far as mentees, I think what I always try to do is talk to people in very realistic terms about, there are things that you can do, things that you may want to do, things you can't do, and you have to figure out what makes sense for the time of life that you're in. And then don't let go of the dream. If you decide that you want to be a partner at Microsoft, you have to understand that there are going to be times where you are not always happy. and that's okay. But you have to be able to get out of that. And if you're the type of person who's like, no, I need my 3-week vacation on a quarterly basis, and that's how I'm setting up my life, being a partner at Microsoft is probably not for you. Those people work a lot, and that's okay. You can pivot and still have a great life, still do amazing things, and still have a career and life that really that's reflective of what you really want and what you value. I think the last thing that I talk to mentors, my mentees about, and I think for anyone, it's follow-up. Follow-up can be so hard. There are so many opportunities I see people either win or lose just based on following up. Return the email in a timely fashion. Return the text in a timely fashion. Again, we're back to intergenerational relationships. Please don't team text me. Spell out you. Just spell it out. And part of the reason why I want you to communicate with me like that is because when I tell you to communicate with somebody else, I know that you know how to communicate with them, because if they don't have any teens in their life, if they don't have any younger people in their life, they interpret that sort of communication as completely unprofessional, where it's just a more casual style. That's it. That's all that I have.
I love that. I love that. Super, super honest. And sometimes we need that brutally honest advice, especially around work-life balance, what's realistic, things on that note.
Can I add to that? Sorry, like
Absolutely.
but my everyone here, my network is my net worth. And so if you are sending an email with a U and not YOU, I'm not sending that forward to anyone, because that is my representation. Anyone that I send forward or add to a program or connect with a peer, if I send not what I deem as like the best for me, then that can hinder me long term as well. And so go into it with that mindset of, if you're going to ask someone to be a mentor or for someone to advocate for you, go in as their representation. It doesn't have to be perfect, but at least try to make things as the best that they can possibly be, and how you would want somebody long-term to present to you if you became a partner or a lead of a company. So keep that in mind.
Absolutely love that. That is spot on. I wrote down 2 things under the mentee, and then just one quick mentor that drastically helped me in my first role. From a mentee standpoint, the first thing I put was make your mentor's life easy. That sounds like a very general statement, but more specifically, make their task easy. What you're asking for them, make it a layup for them, right? It's not, hey Shonda, hey Sonia, where should I work at Microsoft, right? Boom, they're busy, families, life. That is a very tough of a mentor to spend that amount of time thinking through those things. Very different if you come, here's this very specific role within the marketing department. Who do you know? Make it easy for people to work on your behalf. It shows that you're doing that preparation up front. And naturally, human beings, we like to knock out easier tasks by nature. So make it easy for your mentor. The second piece that I wrote down is my testimony more so, and that is it's kind of back around resumes, and that's make yourself a walking brand. Make sure that you're advertising yourself easily so that people can know how to connect with you, right? Early on, either Sonia or Shonda said it, most of big tech does not look like you, right? Most of big tech is not African American, Black or brown, and that is totally fine, because there's a lot of great people that aren't Black and brown, right, who are willing to help you. However, make it easy for them to connect with you. Be professionally dressed, but wear your college, right? If there's a certain thing that you're into, have it on your wristband. If you attend a big conference in Sydney, Australia every year that only programmers know about, wear that book bag to work, because people are always looking to see, how can I connect with you, right? Do it in airports. Like, these are things that are just low-hanging fruits. When I first started working at HP, I feel out of place in a sense. I was like, man, I'm super confident, never had this issue before. And I remember walking, and I'm in a fraternity, I'm an alpha, and I just had on a little alpha band, and lo and behold, a gentleman just saw that one day. He saw that he was doing like a little career fair there, and he sat me down every Friday for lunch for over a year and a half, paid for my lunch, talked to me. Hey, your outfit needs to be better here. Hey man, like you're not presentable enough here. And 18 months straight, he was there for me. Helped me get my PMP, within my first 2 years out of undergrad. And so what if I hadn't worn that wristband that day? Right? A company like HP out in Herndon, I may have never saw that man again. And so that one little small brand, and everybody here has something that they represent, that they're part of, that someone else is also part of. So show it, wear it, be there. Is half the battle. So you don't always have to open your mouth. Let your brand do the talking there. Is another way to get good mentors. One last piece on the mentee. A mentor will always tell you what worked for them. They have your best interest. Take as much as you can out of it, and then go from there, right? But they mean well, but they can't give you all the answers. They can only give you what worked for them, and that holds true for most people from a mentor mentee standpoint. My last question, and then we may have maybe 5 or 7 minutes for any questions that may be in the chat. Is let me scroll up here. Can you speak to any programs or groups that HBCU students can connect with at your respective companies? And how does your company overall supports diversity and inclusion in tech? Starting with you, Sonia.
Yeah, I mean, we host our Black Hat group, we host events throughout the year. And so we broadcast those on usually on LinkedIn. So if you're following me, you'll see them. And that's where, I mean, we bring all of our leadership in. We're very fortunate in our DC office to be a policy office. So we do have a lot of Black leaders, since Howard is right down the street, literally from my office. And so we do have a quite a large group. And so I recommend joining and coming to some of our events when we host them. And I sorry, can you say the last part of that question?
And overall, how does your company support just diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I mean, it's a top priority for our company. When it comes to hiring, it's definitely something that is factored in, because we do want more folks using our products. And so if we don't have folks making those products that look like us, then there's a high chance that there will be issues long term. And so I can't speak to directly on like the DEI team since I don't work directly with them. But I do know that we do have internship programs that open up at the beginning of the year. And yeah.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Shonda, yourself?
So Microsoft has a lot of employee resource groups. Interestingly enough, there are, of course, ones based on your race or ethnicity, but some of the most, I would say, impactful ones have nothing to do with that. Our women's resource group is very, very impactful. And then Microsoft is, I would say, a leader in tech space when it comes to making sure that things are accessible. So our accessibility groups are very, very, very impactful. We have a group related to justice reform. Again, it's not anything really necessarily to do with tech, but it's something that we care about as a company. And then, of course, there's a background to it and how it relates to the business side. But our justice reform groups are very, very active. And those are all things, again, as you can, I feel like we keep talking about LinkedIn, which, okay, shout out to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a Microsoft company. So, but that is really how you get so much information. And then while we're talking about this, if you really want to think about this in a bigger sense, let the algorithm work for you. We can tell you some of the things that we know about at our companies, but the reality is they're just so big. And setting up a Finsta or some other social media based something where, the algorithm tells you tell the algorithm what you like, and then it tells you what you like. Those are some of the easiest ways to find out about what's going on at these companies. And I think the last thing I want to add is the reality is, we have an important election coming up. I hope you all are voting. And when it comes to these initiatives focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, we don't know what that will look like, in the next 6 months, in the next year. But the reality is the voices and the diversity that we represent today is still very necessary for these companies to succeed, and they know that. And so when we're talking about the support and what that looks like, I think as students, you all have a great opportunity to continue to grow and evolve, because right now you're not expected to know anything. You're just expected to be interesting and brilliant and Black or brown or however else you identify. That's what's expected of you right now. And that's exciting to be at this point in time and to be able to move forward versus, other people who have built, whole careers in this space and don't know what will happen with it.
Love that. Very, very powerful. A ton of work being done clearly at Microsoft, at Meta, at HP. We have year over year been able to increase representation from the HBCU specifically in internship roles. And I give large credit, he's not on the call here today, to Donnell Taylor, a graduate of Morgan State University. He has taken the program by, just ran off with it. So I'm see even some students here on the call, that have been able to participate in some of our programming. Next year, we'll be having our 5th HBCU Technology Conference, virtual conference for students. This year, they got to participate in building out GPTs and winning a lot of fabulous prizes. And so that is a virtual conference. We'll make sure to connect with Keontae and the team to provide more links and programming on that side. But overall, again, we, all are in this collectively across the ecosystem and, clearly vouching for the talent at the HBCU systems and so HBCU universities. And so with that being said, I'll turn over to any questions, or Keontae, if you want to chime in as well to facilitate those, let me know.
Yeah, definitely. I can read those from the chat. But first and foremost, I want to say this has been dynamic, gems on gems, and I'm seeing it light up in the chat of some great questions already and just some great feedback. So we do have a question from Uche that says, when we are getting ready to seek out early career employment opportunities, how many companies would you suggest that we focus on, especially since tech is very competitive? Good question, and I'll pass it over to you all if you have any thoughts.
I can go first, and Sonia has gone first all the rest of the time. I would say it's not necessarily about the number of companies, but where you're looking in each company. Again, the reality is it can be pretty easy to go on LinkedIn and submit your resume, but I think that you at the very least need to focus in an area of the company, so then you can target other connections you may want to make. Something else that we didn't talk about, but what I've found has been very interesting, and it does take a little bit of bravery, is that I've had people reach out to me, whether they're students or working professionals, and ask for an informational interview. And that informational interview is them, taking 15, I think the longest one I've probably done is 20 minutes to talk about what I'm doing in my career, because they've either seen the work that I've been doing or they've seen a job listing. And these are strangers. These are people who at best maybe have 2 connections away from me, but they're interested in the role and they want to know more. And I would say, again, as a student, people are always willing to talk to students. And if you have a particular part of the company that you're interested in, it makes it so much easier to narrow down what you want to do or what the possibilities are. And again, try to make a personal connection.
Yeah, I love the informational interviews. That's great. I'm now thinking for myself, like I should be doing that. I will say that this panel is called Big Tech. And so I do think I want to be a realist, is that, to start out, to go from entry level to big tech, it's possible, but it is not as common as I think that I hear it. I hear around. I think starting out at like smaller companies or even at consulting firms, that's a good way to get into the door. A lot of we have a contingent workforce, and I guess it would be like I don't know how to describe, they're temp employees essentially. I guess that would be the best way to describe it. But they all have come over from working from Deloitte or working from, any other consulting firm. And so I think that's a good way to enter into the tech space, possibly starting there and applying to roles, still applying to big tech roles, but being realistic that there are other opportunities. even now we live in this, after COVID, we live in this world of everything is kind of tech. I mean, you could go and work at, you know, any restaurant's corporation for a restaurant and find a tech job, and build your resume there. So I just wanted to add, like, be a realist in that sense. But I do think that reaching out, having conversations with folks already in that space, having an idea of where you want to go is really helpful, because then you can hone in on the person. You can quickly do and I'm going to shout out LinkedIn again. I do love LinkedIn. But you can search, like, okay, public policy, you know, Meta, and you see a list of folks, and you could say, okay, I know that I want to stay in the DC area. I want to work in policy. You can get really creative. I want to work in UX. Okay, let me search UX program manager, and you can find a host of people at the company that you want to land at, and then try to set up those informal chats, because I think that's genius.
Awesome. Thank you too. And then lastly, as a closing question, I know that of course, tech conferences are one of the best hubs to typically connect with tech professionals. I know Afrotech is next month, of course. So given that, are there any upcoming tech conferences, or maybe even just local DC mixers or happy hours that you all have up and coming for your 3 companies, that maybe any students or even just early career professionals online can connect with to, you know, just greater grow that synergy with your companies and familiarity with it? Anything upcoming that we can share?
Nothing comes to mind immediately in the area for HP. We certainly will be at Afrotech, of course. We'd love to see anyone there that's in the greater Houston area. But nothing that comes to mind in like mid-Atlantic or even in the South right now. Of course, recruiting season and you know, stuff at the HBCU campuses really concluded in like the last week or so. I know from like a university recruitment standpoint. But if I know of anything that I'm just not thinking of right now, I will certainly share it out.
I think one thing that I wish that I took advantage of when I was at Howard is during homecoming. I was definitely partying during homecoming, where I should have been going to like the career conferences that were being hosted. So homecoming, it's still some folks' homecoming season. You go to the career conferences that are happening at the same time, because I know that we sponsor, I think all of the large tech companies are sponsoring events at homecoming. And so please make sure that you're still going to some of those career conferences. And during CBC as well, too.
Right. So I can't think of anything specifically, but I know that Microsoft will be at Afrotech. And then I would also recommend, there are lots of other conferences around that our companies all sponsor. And so if you see, I'm thinking of one that I've seen in particular, it's All In Together. It's typically geared towards women, but they had free student tickets last year, and it was at the Conrad right in City Center. And it was an amazing experience, but it was free for undergrads, and my ticket was far from free. So I would encourage you to also look just a little bit deeper, as you know, if you see conferences and you see who the sponsors are, that means that a representative from that company is going to show up to those events, because I think we can get very focused on things like Afrotech, where it is very specific towards tech, but there are just so many other ways to meet people and to get a foot in the door that's professionally related, but not necessarily tech focused.
Definitely such great feedback. I know there were so many great pen to paper moments, a lot of great gems from you all. And so our team is extremely grateful. I know the audience is grateful. So thank you for this moment. And lastly, I will drop your LinkedIn's in the chat if the attendees would like to connect with you. But other than that, I truly appreciate you all. This was such a phenomenal session. Thank you guys. And please enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much.